Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Passive House 101. I am Jose Sosa. I will be your host for today. And today we have a really exciting episode with Tessa Bradley. We'll be discussing the 10 steps to building a single family passive house. Just a short intro about Tessa. She is a co-principal and architect at Artisans Group, a Pacific Northwest-based sustainable architecture and planning firm. A tenacious, award-winning architect and expert in building science sustainability. Tessa has designed some of the most energy-efficient homes in the country, with hundreds of her designs built and scattered across the map in Seattle, Olympia, Portland, and as far south as Austin, Texas. Big picture thinker and goal-oriented, Tessa is the strongest minimalist at her firm. She's happiest when she resolves a multitude of challenges with a single elegant solution. Tessa advocates for pairing building science with innovative design to make sustainability both morally and aesthetically desirable. So, that's a really great explanation of who she is, and I am really looking forward to hearing her presentation. So I'll cede the floor to Tessa. Welcome.
Thank you, Jose. I appreciate it. Well, that was a great intro. Thank you, Jose. Probably not too much more to add on that. Except that I have really amazing employees and a really incredible partner. We recently bought our building a couple years ago at the end of COVID in Tumwater, Washington, and we'll talk a little bit about the Passive House project that's brewing on there commercially. But we are focused on hiring women and minorities, and we're a 100% women-owned firm. So we're a bit of a a unique commodity in the industry, put it that way. We do lots of passive house projects, and we've been able to leverage pretty extensive single family residence experience into much larger multifamily and commercial passive house projects in the last few years. So about half the firm does commercial work, hospitality, medical clinics, all kinds of stuff. And the other half of our firm is doing a lot of housing and primarily passive house housing. We also have a really strong interest in prefab, and I would say 90% of our passive house work is also prefabricated these days by our favorite prefabricator, Collective Carpentry. Whoop, whoop. Hopefully they're in the room to hear that. Rusa and I, my co-principal, just a little bit personally about us, despite running the second largest architecture firm in our county, we are also moms. And her daughter is a budding designer, Margot, and that's her designing her new bedroom and her new passive house that Rusa is moving into this week. And that's my son, who is fresh off the boat and is trying to shove triangles through circle-shaped holes. That's the stage we're at. I enjoyed making this slide so much. My co-principal was like, "You want to be Tina Turner in that photo?" And I was like, I do want to be Tina Turner in that photo. So I renamed the presentation a PH Thunderdome in my head because we're going to cover a lot of information quickly. But what I'm going to do for you is try to walk you through sequentially how I think about a passive house project and the things that at this point I sort of naturally do, but I've tried to categorize them and capture them here so that if you've never designed one, that you would sort of have a map to follow of where to start. So the first thing I think about when I'm starting on a single family residence that's a passive house is the siding. If we were doing a less sensitive design, we might just put our house, wherever we want on the site, not really thinking about the elements around it quite as sensitively. And I think that we really want to be aware of what can shade the site topographically and vegetation and things like that. Or, if you're in an urban setting, buildings nearby will have examples of both. But this is an example of a project where I shoved the house very, very far to the north to get us away from a rim of trees around the property. And although the property was quite large, we designed the house in such a way that it would really have a lot of exposure on the south. And then we also, topography can be a surprising influence over the shape and orientation of your passive house too. So just kind of thinking about some of those things as you begin to lay it out. This is a home that we shoved all the way to the north, even though it was a big lot, because there's a rim of trees around it. And we just really loaded the southern side of the building so that even if the north gets developed, you really will have the experience of the depth of the lot and the solar gains on the project. So form, don't be an asshole. That's what we say at the office. You can be a little bit of an asshole, but if you're a lot of an asshole, you're gonna have a really hard time getting your project into compliance with either of the passive house standards. So it's a surface area to square footage ratio, right? So you can have 100 square feet with so much surface area, or you can have 100 square feet with twice as much surface area. And we really need to be aware of that component of the design as we're working on it. A great example, please don't sue me, Olson Kundig, because I very much like your work, but it's an amazing design, but it's a terrible form factor, right? This would be a very, very, very difficult project to bring into compliance with passive house certification. And this slide made me laugh so hard. It's an okay design. It's one of our designs, but it's got a great form factor, and it was the first passive house we ever designed and built when we were a design build firm. And it's a great home, but it definitely doesn't have the expression the Olson Kundig does it? Daylighting and windows. Let's be assholes, but not too much. This is again in that form factor category of you can make your life really hard if you follow current rationales around windows. We have to think about them a little differently. Additionally, in an urban setting, which we do a lot of, you're going to want to be thinking about lots that aren't developed or are going to get developed or could be redeveloped. And one of the tricks that we've used to do that is to articulate the form to get away from our neighbors and create opportunities for southern or eastern gains in our climate. And oftentimes, the extra form you're going to add, that extra surface area of articulating the form more, is worth it for the solar gains. So that is often a trade-off that we make, and it works well. This is an example project that we did that has an undeveloped lot to the south that we expect to be developed in the long run. The house articulates back away from that southern lot and creates a scenario where the building can be heated no matter what gets developed. The other thing with daylighting and access to daylighting is you want your glass to be as big as you can, and you want the least amount of frame versus the amount of glass that a window will have. So this is that same house we just looked at. This is our little southern array that we pulled back to get our solar access. And if it even just had one more vertical amount of frame in the middle of each of those windows, and those windows weren't really as long as they could be for their scale, or for how the windows can be made, if they had that extra vertical strip of framing of frame of the window, then you can see that it bumps us out of compliance. That top unit is 5.98 kilobtu's per square foot per year, and the bottom one we're in compliance at 5.6. And that's just one little southern array that added even half the frame, right? So frame bad, glass good. That's what we need to remember when we're starting to work. And this comes from Evan at Zola Windows. He helped me do some of those comparisons. The other thing I'm thinking a lot about really early when I'm just playing with forms and kind of figuring out where things are located is, the scale of the glass. Am I going to make the bottom unit operable and then just temper that? Am I going to make the windows really big but have them be fixed? Oftentimes we're used to this like really thin clerestory proportion, and with passive house we want to try and get that as close to a square as possible, right? Better center of glass to frame ratio. And then of course a lot of the European windows we're working with can do really large openings, right? Accordion, sliding glass door, all kinds of interesting, I'm doing a passive house project right now where they slide out and then like pocket together. There's lots of really neat operabilities that you're going to have access to just by nature of doing passive house windows. So here's some examples. These lower units are operable, the upper units are fixed. This can be a very cost-effective way to design a lot of glass for a passive house. On this building, we also did clerestories above the exterior porch. and actually painted that surface that the full light is coming in and reflecting off of. We painted that like a really bright lemon color, so it reflects warm, almost sunlight into the ceiling, even though it's not really that sunny here. It's a trick. And then I grabbed this off of McMansionL. It's a really great website that just makes fun of architecture. And, we're really used, especially with high-end houses or, just really common traditional houses, seeing lots of perforations, lots and lots of openings, right? Instead of big openings, lots of little ones. And that is just the kiss of death when it comes to designing a window package you can afford for your project. This is a project that I really love by Ensral Studio, but it's another good example. It would be very hard to bring into compliance because of all of the mullions and muttons in all the windows, right? Those actually worsen the performance of the window and oftentimes are very costly in a passive house window. So I haven't cracked that nut of, if this is the aesthetic you wanted, I don't have a great solution for you. I just know that this would be difficult to bring into compliance, even though it's very lovely. So here's some more examples of our work. This is a house that was really, really shaded, but was on the water. And so the client wanted lots of views. And so in our climate, in this condition, again, big glass was our friend. We weren't going to overheat the building, and the bigger the glass was, the better the glass was going to perform, versus if I tried to minimize the glass and still take in the view for the client. Here's another example, trying to optimize those clerestory sizes up top there. You can see they're pretty tall. They're not like a little sliver of a window. That helps a lot with passive house. Here's this building is an urban setting in Seattle, in Queen Anne. And again, it has that articulation. So that upper portion there above the little bump out is pulled back to again get to that southern exposure for the building. And this was not ideal in the sense that just the very upper floor had that southern exposure, but we did have a tube that ran to the basement and a fan. And so we were actually circulating the hot air of the upstairs down through the building, and it worked really well. But again, articulating in urban settings. Some of these projects are so beautiful, and I have a lot of examples of other people's work that I love. This is Michael Ingue of Bax Ingue Architects. This is one of his projects. But what I noticed when I was organizing all of my friends' pictures into this presentation was that a lot of the strategies were the same, right? Like, look at his big glass windows and doors look a lot like the ones on my project and look a lot like the ones on everybody's projects, because we're all trying to optimize the performance of the glass. And they're all very different projects with very different aesthetics, but you can see that there's kind of like a language developing, which I could see architects maybe not liking, feeling like, oh, I don't want my work to look like others' work, but I don't think the work looks alike. And I think all work is sort of out of a time and period and out of a movement, right? Like all Victorians look like Victorians, and we don't think they all suck. So I don't know. I was thinking a lot about that, the languages that are developing and embracing them for passive house. This is a really amazing project by my friend Julie, and Julie Torres Moskovitz. She did a retrofit, and of course the front facade was historic. And you can see that she just got away from the double hung windows and went for the tilt turns. And I really think, it does a great job of fitting into the neighborhood. It's beautiful. You wouldn't walk by it and be like, what the hell? It's gorgeous. But it's ignoring, the little historic pieces that don't work well, like double hung windows. This is Kaplan Thompson, an amazing firm out of Portland, Maine. You can see this is kind of a more traditional project, but look what's happening. The big windows again, trying to get to that ideal, frame to glass ratio, but this one has a little bit more traditional detailing and some more nods to traditional architecture. This is a really cool project that I love. Alessandro Avi's Olive House. I think this house does a couple things really well. I'll talk a little bit later about like profile, but I love that it's simple, and he went for a lot of glass, and he went for a dramatic move. It's working well. River Architects, another amazing passive house focused firm. Same deal, right? Like we're starting to get kind of a rhythm and kind of a language happening with much of our glass. A strong profile can do wonders. sometimes I feel like young designers just want to articulate the shit out of their buildings, and just, have like a lot of visual going on, I guess. And what I really think is a really more elegant move with our passive house work is to go for something that's got a great profile, try to make one dramatic move that you can support with the rest of the building, but is sort of dramatic in its simplicity, if that makes sense. Here's some other profiles of our work. That one on the bottom there is being built in Portland by an incredible design build firm, Bird's Mouth. And again, it's a really simple design, but it's got these receding solar scoops. It's got this really strong, interesting profile that supports the performance of the building. We've got a big passive house timber frame that's an octagon. Don't get me started. And it's got a really interesting profile. Very cool project. And then just, trying to figure out what our move is and what that profile is early, I think can really take you really far with your passive house design. This is Bird's Mouth, the design build firm I was talking about. They have some really beautiful projects, and this is a great one, using the simplicity of the form and the profile, and the detailing is really lovely. Love Shack, good friend of mine, Lindsay, her co-principal's last name is Love, and her last name is Shack, so they're Love Shack Architecture. I just don't think you can get better marketing than that. But they are also using, look at the rhythm of those windows. They're in a colder climate than us, so I think you're going to see less like walls of glass. But that other project, has a lot of glass, has some corner glass, and again, you're seeing the same language come out of that, right? And then another project by River Architects. Great profile on this one. This is an awesome project that's actually in Scotland that I just think did an amazing job of having that strength of profile, but simplicity of statement. So now we've gotten to the point that we've got a form, we've got our windows in more or less, right? We've played with our strong profile. We have something we like. It's time to model our ugly baby. I tried to find a higher res photo of this, and there isn't one. I don't know why. I don't know why you wouldn't want a higher res photo of that. So here's some tools that people in my office use. I have not personally used them, so keep that in mind if you want to pick my brain about it afterwards. But this is the little form factor calculator from PHA. And you can just put in your envelope area, and it's just like, and your state and your city, and you can just get like a really quick, like, how screwed am I? And, lots of my projects would say I'm very screwed, and that's why we have, more detailed modeling to be able to refine the designs to get them to work, right? But if you're doing your first one and you just want like a double check, some people in my office use this as just a real quick little noodle. My co-principal really likes the prescriptive path that PHA came out with. We certifying her house prescriptively as our first one, and a lot of our work wouldn't qualify, but using the sheet like a tool can be a really quick way. I learned, way back in the day, I'm one of the really early adopters of passive house, and I don't know woofy, and so I could use something like this if I wanted to double check a project that I'm worried about or it seems particularly tricky. I think it's really easy to freak out about assemblies too early in the process, because what I've learned is that you can do it a lot of ways. And, like I said, we're really into collective carpentry and prefab. But what's the one thing that all of these different walls that I've done have in common? They're all about the same thickness. They're all thick in my climate, right? I'm going to do a custom home with lots of glass in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to have thick walls. So I think it can be a great question to ask and to be thinking about a little bit, because it could, affect or, maybe influence what decisions you go for with your massings. But it's not really a huge question, I think, in the very beginning. Just draw yourself a 12-inch deep wall and move on, and then start to figure it out in, design development. Same with roofs. Like, I feel like designers, some of my younger designers, like, can get really like, well, what kind of roof is it going to be? And it's like, we don't care yet. Draw a roof you like, and then we'll figure out the assembly. If it's more than a 212 pitch in our office, it's usually vented. And if it's less than a 212 pitch, it's usually a warm cap, and it's not vented. And guess what? They're about the same size, just like the walls. So rock on, don't stress about it. Again, the prescriptive tool, my co-principal will oftentimes just plug in some assemblies just to kind of take a look. And it can just be a nice little double check. I feel like when you've designed a lot of passive houses, you know, at the point that I'm in my career, I've gotten to the point where I'll design one and I'll really have a strong sense for whether it's going to be easy or hard to get it to certification. And that's been pretty right on for me in the last few years. So I'm not actively using a lot of these tools, but until you develop those instincts, I think it can be helpful. The other thing I'm finding is the longer you do passive houses, you start to solve the same problems over and over. And most of the problems are created by, you know, the window language needing to be big and the assemblies are fat, right? So what commonly happens is, what do you do with the forehead of your project? Because it's pretty hard to get it to be, you know, maybe something proportionally you want. And you don't want all your work to look the same, of course. You don't want everything to have giant foreheads. So we have lots of detailing around projects about reducing and minimizing and handling this. Probably our most common strategy, if we have a forehead problem, is to bring the headers up into the roof assembly. You can typically you can do this a lot of different ways. You know, you can sink beams up in there. You can do girder trusses and run trusses along them. You know, we do a lot of prefab, so roof panels, but with the structure sunk up in them. It's a really great strategy to get rid of some of that forehead. So here's that detail we were just looking at with the tapered eaves. You know, that taper reduces the forehead, and then the structure is up in the roof. So the roof really just looks like it's floating on the glass, right? Which can be, if that's a detail you're after or something you're trying to accomplish, I think can be a really lovely way to handle several things at once. You can see this same approach here, how the glass goes right up to the ceiling. It's a flat ceiling. This was a really shady project. It was really in the woods and it was going to have a lot of glass. So we knew we were going to need a lot of insulation in the roof. And so we gave ourselves enough room to do that. And we didn't give ourselves a big ugly forehead because we sucked those headers up into the roof trusses. And also this bottom right picture, see how the light is casting across that ceiling from the clerestory over the front door and a little bit from the ones over the stairs. The ceiling becomes a reflective surface when you run the glass all the way to the ceiling, and you can actually get the sunlight to penetrate deeper into the design by using, if you miss the ceiling's dark and it doesn't become a reflective surface, but if you can actually cast the light across the surface, you really get a much brighter design. And I've seen that time and time again on our work. Here again, same strategy, glass up to the ceiling, ceiling's a reflector. Porches. Porches become the bane of your existence the longer that you do passive house designs. We've really come down to 3 ways of handling them. One is to make your, well, here's the problem, right? Some wall assemblies, depending on what you're using, are not going to be able to hold the weight of all of, you know, a large front porch like this project. And so without a bunch of thermal bridging, a big beam, a rim board, something that you might not want in your design. And so what we chose to do on this project is thicken the rain screen, because it's already, you know, 1 inch or 1.5 inches, something like that, 3/4, you know, whatever our strategy is for that. And if you just deepen it to like a 2x4 depth, you can find that you can hide, you know, wood posts, steel posts, whatever you need to do to support a big overhang like that. You can do it in a hidden fashion, and because you can't see the bottom and the top in plane, you can't tell that they're not lining up, right? So you can't tell that bottom wall is deeper than the upper wall. And then of course the porch has that really light sort of mid-century modern effect, right? But it's got a bunch of structure in that deepened rain screen. Another strategy is to just expose the structure. On this project, we have exposed steel posts. You can see them up against the building. They're just like, you know, 3/4 of an inch off the building. And you can just see the exposed structure. It's just standing outside of our passive house wall. And actually, I was really happy with the detailing on this project. I really liked the way the steel felt, and the client really liked it. So definitely a different, but also a fun strategy. The other thing that happens with porches is oftentimes you start getting creative about where they bear and how they bear. So on this project, I didn't have to do any of that fancy post detailing, because this wood framed chimney actually became the support for a cantilevered flitch beam, which is what you're seeing on this previous detail. So it's a combination of steel and wood framing, and it cantilevers off that chimney and supports the framing coming out from the roof trusses. And we didn't have to do anything fancy. And none of it bears on any of our insulated walls. Porches, more porches. This project, if you look at that front porch, or that porch off the back of the building up there, this started, the detailing of this actually came out of wanting to maintain the cantilever that we had of the living room, but also wanting to mostly bear the weight of that porch on that concrete wall that we would run along, instead of against the insulated walls where we would have some of that challenging detailing, right? So the porch there is cantilevered off the beam both directions. So it's cantilevered out towards the water and back towards the house, which reduces the amount of weight on the building. So we didn't have to do any fancy detailing back there, thermal bridging or rim joists or anything. Then all the joists cantilever off of the beam, which is cantilevered off of the concrete, and the beam is kept from overturning by being pinned in place by the post on the left. And I hear, when I talk to other architects, I oftentimes hear a lot of fear around, will all my work have to, not have cool detailing, or, and it's really just, once you start to understand what you're trying to do, you embrace the detailing, and it actually can start to be a motivator. I'm not sure I would have come to this conclusion or done something that I like this well if I wasn't trying to reduce the weight back to the building. And, the motivation that got us to the neat detailing was entirely around performance. And I think those conflicts and overlaps can actually be where some of your best work happens. And then the third option is, this is a collective carpentry project. This is my co-principal Roos's house that's almost done. You can see the construction drainage tubing sitting in the living room. We photographed it while the interior was at framing. The exterior was complete. But the front porch is so small that it actually can go back and bear on a little rim board that's attached to the prefabricated wall that has a TJI, right? So the TJI is cantilevered off of your structural wall, and then the rim board's cantilevered off of that. And because the loads are so small, you can get away with that. And then they just thickened the rain screen and hid a steel post, in the end there. And got yourself a lovely little porch with some really fun steel framing, and you didn't ruin your house doing it. These are really my last two thoughts. Embrace the constraints as a meaningful part of the design to support your party, right? So you're trying to create a language for every project and then talk with that language. And if you can embrace the constraints, it will start to result in really interesting, I think, unique, beautiful, high performance detailing. And that doesn't mean that you have to have an ugly project or even a limited project. This was a really simple passive house we did in the San Juan Islands. It was a very difficult remote build. So we kept the design very simple and then did a very sculptural front porch. And this was sort of motivated out of, well, the porch has to be freestanding and not, touch the walls, right? Or create a thermal bridge. But it actually turned into a really expressive sculptural opportunity for the designers on the project, right? For us, the architects. And I remember wondering if I would have even gone this direction with this had the project not been passive house, right? And then last but not least, hierarchy of choices. The other mistake I feel like I see people make when they're designing their first passive house is they try to reach for too many aspirational moves at once. This is not the last house you're going to design. So pick a couple of dramatic choices, fight hard for them, detail them well. But I say this to architects that I'm mentoring all the time, like not every detail matters. There are some architects that every detail matters, and that's great. That is an approach. But if you want to pull off a passive house, like don't treat everything like it's critical. Figure out what's actually critical, focus on it, do a really good job, and don't build in too much complexity. Try to build in complexity that's going to add the right amount of drama, and be your move, be your statement. And then, it's okay for some of the project to be simple because what you're doing is already, kind of different and complex. So remember, it's not the last passive house you're going to design. You don't have to incorporate every interesting idea you have in this design, but you can be an asshole if you want. I don't really care. This is a project that we're working on coming off the boards right now. That's a waterfront passive house, prefabricated with Collective. We're really excited about. And I think what we've been enjoying talking about at the office is that it's got cantilevers, it's got an articulated form, it's got a lot of things working for it, but it's modeling really well. It's still got those limitations that we just explored in this presentation, and the detailing is all about honoring them, working around them, expressing them as best we can. And I just think that kind of creativity and that conflict of goals can really create great work. And this is my slide. That means wrap it up, Tessa. The other thing that I would say is we all know we can't save the world one fancy ass house at a time, but don't be discouraged by that. A really great place to learn how to do passive houses on a residence, right? The scale, the ability to communicate with the contractor. You can take more risks. It's a smaller project. There's so many great things about learning on a residence, on a housing project that you can then leverage. We did a lot of passive houses for many years before we started getting commercial multifamily passive projects. This is a 124 passive house unit neighborhood that I'm doing with senior housing and townhouses and multifamily co-op condo kind of thing for Habitat. And we're leveraging all of the experience that we got doing passive houses into larger and larger work as a firm. So this is your proving ground. Get really good at it. Figure out what's expensive and what's not. Figure out what works really well in your climate. Figure out what the builders did and didn't like. Document it, evolve, because there's a big wide world of passive house work out there. And this is our new office building that we hope to start on this year. We're just about through land use, and we hope to break ground in the next 6 months. And this is our new Artisans Group office on the bottom with 6 passive house apartments above. And it'll be on the same property that our current little office is on. So I think that concludes my presentation. Hopefully I didn't go over on time.
Thank you, Tessa. That was actually really good. I love all those snippets of information that we can get from practitioners. So right now I'm just going to hand it over to our sponsors, and after that we will have the Q&A. So stay tuned for that.
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewiso, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Prosoco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Coltraco Ultrasonics, Euroline Windows, Holstrom System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US engineered wood T-stud. Thank you, sponsors.
Awesome. Thank you, Jose, for everything today. And thank you, Tessa. My name is Kim Davis. I'm the programming manager here at the Accelerator, and I will be facilitating the Q&A. We are going to start off with a familiar face, Michael Engley.
Thanks. I love being first. First of all, great presentation. I knew it would be great. So thanks. Beautiful work. So I actually have two questions. So the first one is, how do you start your process off with your clients to get them just as excited about Passive House as you obviously get them about design? Because you're definitely doing both, which is great. So how do you do that? What's your secret sauce? And then the second question.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'll do the first question, then I'll do my second question afterwards.
Okay, that'd be better for my brain. I would say a lot of our clients are coming to us for Passive House. So it's a really easy sale. Like 75% of the time they found us because they were looking for a really pretty Passive House and they found one online and contact us. The other 25% of the time, they just liked our work and they don't actually know anything about how we're doing our work. And so my approach is I kind of like slow step them, you know, I don't make them understand. I'm not trying to make them a Passive House architect. I don't go into the weeds unless they're really nerdy and they want to like nerd out with me about something, then I'm in. But like, I would say your average client wants you to do a really good job for them and wants you to advocate for the best project they can have, right? So I'll often say things like, well, you know, code is the worst building you can legally build, and we do better than that. And here's the science we use. And if they're like new to Passive House and they're not like that nerdy about it, we don't usually certify. We do all the same things. We model, we blow our door, all the same assemblies, all the same work. And I really feel like certification is just for those clients who are like really into Passive House. Otherwise, they just get a Passive House and they don't really know it till it's too late. Then they're like, this is awesome, right?
Love that. And then I also noticed that a bunch of your projects are prefab and a bunch of your projects are conventional. And this might be too difficult to kind of quantify so simply, but how different is the approach when you start those projects from like SD to CD? It's something I think about a lot in the office. So I'm curious. I can't imagine other people aren't wondering the same.
Yeah, totally. SD, I don't really think it's that different. I mean, I think if you were trying to, like, I probably, does it influence my SD? I don't think it does drastically, because Collective is really great at accomplishing, you know, like a custom design. And I don't think our work is typically so crazy that it would be like, nobody can prefab that. You know what I mean? So I don't think it drastically affects our SD. I would say we like to decide as we're going into DD what the delivery methodology is, because we have had projects that weren't going to be prefab that then like became prefab later, and those are the ones that it's not really easy. And so I would say that like that transition from SD to DD is where you need to decide.
Next up, we have a question from Nick Coleridge. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. If you could come off of mute and ask your question.
Yes, no worries. So actually, I just had a question, just picking out my window package now, and one of the suppliers is offering all tempered glass, and I'm just wondering if there's some advantage to that.
So you know, I bet there's other feedback from people. I have found that the quality of the tempered glass is slightly, there's something about its visibility that is slightly different than not tempered with a European window. And I even had a project where all of the glass in a big project was tempered. And because it was tempered under certain light conditions, you could almost see these like little half moon crescents, like where they had stroked or tempered. I don't know the process, you know, but like there was something about the tempering that actually added just ever so slightly a texture to the glass that could be seen under very specific conditions sometimes. So like I use tempered glass on our projects, but if I don't have to, I don't use tempered glass. I only use it where I have to. So I don't know if that helps your decision, Nick.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. I think this would be the first time that they're shipping overseas, and so they thought tempered would be better for transport.
If they're worried about it needing to be tempered for transport, I would say they've got problems because I don't know, every window package I've ever seen show up from Europe, it's like packaged like it's the Mona Lisa in there, you know?
Right,
So
right.
I don't know. I've never had a window arrive broken in a passive house window package, but they get packaged really well. So, you know, and also
Hmm.
like knock on wood, I probably shouldn't say that out loud. Now it's going to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Next up, we have Mary Ellen Lynch.
I actually had put two questions in there, but I'll try to be brief. The first one was I was just curious if you also provide the interior design for all of your buildings.
We do. So we have architects that do interiors mostly on staff. We do like a lot of like, you know, bespoke restaurants and coffees shops and, you know, lots of kind of like interiors focused stuff as well. We also have some interior designers on staff as well. Yeah, so we do it all in house.
Okay, cool. Does that affect Passive House at all?
It does. So, oh my God, like so lighting is like this thing that we act like it's fine. We're just gonna do LED and don't worry, right? But actually we figured out by doing the prescriptive, the FIAS prescriptive certification sheet, if you look at the energy performance of an LED bulb in like a fixture or a fixture that has an integrated LED bulb, like the one that just has a bulb is way more efficient than the one with the integrated LED. And since our loads have gotten super small with Passive House, we actually start to care about that minutia, right? So we've actually gone away from, which we also just generally don't trust that like, we don't want to replace a fixture when that integrated LED dies. It can't be fixed. You have to rip out, it could be like a $600 fixture. And how long is it going to last? 5 years? 10? I don't know. It just doesn't seem, we're getting away from doing any integrated LED lighting. We're doing everything with bulbs and the performance is looking much, much better. So yeah, that's just one of like 10 things I would say interior design effects Passive House.
Sorry, if you don't mind, I'll just quickly throw this one out. And it's touching on something that Michael already brought up, and that was the prefab aspect. You mentioned it several times, but can you be a little more specific as to which components are being prefabbed?
On our multifamily and on our single family work, we're doing a lot of walls and roofs that are prefabricated. I'm actually doing my first project that's got a floor system that's prefabricated as well. Not like a second floor, but like a main floor, like with a crawl space. So I'm learning a lot about that right now. But it's mostly just the walls, roofs, and floors.
Next up, we have Anik, I believe. Wondering, is there, or if you could talk about the special glass for the windows in Passive Houses, just saying that she's noticing so many in the projects and just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Let's see, what could I say? Most of the glass that we're doing is triple pane. And then we're of course paying attention to the coatings that the window manufacturers can get on there too. One thing I will say is that it can be tempting if you have a project with specific parameters or pressures on it to go to low E glass, you know, so it's not accepting as much of the heat of the sun, right? But I will say there is a very big visible transmittance difference with 3 panes of glass with the low E versus the more normal settings. So we have noticed you're not going to want to intermix them. Like if you're going to do low E, that kind of everything needs to be low E that you can see there. And also just be advised, it's like a slightly green tint and I haven't had my clients love it in all conditions. So that's probably, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what I'll say about glass.
Great, that works. Thank you. Next up, we have Nilton Lin. Are you available to ask your question?
Yeah. So first, wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing all this experience. I haven't worked in the past for like multi-family building, and I see you've done a lot of single family. How do you dealing with the like early stage like SD staged for heating and cooling demand. Do you use things like Manu J, or you got some consultant able to estimate those things for you?
That's a really good question, Milton. So in the beginning, we did all the mechanical design ourselves because we couldn't find anybody that knew how to do it, right? So we did a lot of HRV design, a lot of, with like the HRV, manufacturer. We did a lot of mini splits, a lot of small like hydronic floor systems, lots of stuff like that. We've since transitioned into, we have like a consultant that does small residential passive house design for us that are like mini split systems and HRVs. So he'll kind of work that out with us. In SD, I am thinking about where to run things. So I don't always have a perfect solution. And sometimes I really do make bonehead moves where I'm like, shit, where am I going to put that? But for the most part, we kind of have soffitry or like a hallway we can drop or like a little chaseway we can build into the trusses with some like sealed OSB or something, like there's usually a strategy kind of early on that we then refine and execute. And then for higher end projects, I really like Positive Energy. We're working with them on 2 kind of high end big residential passive house projects. They're out of Austin, Texas, and they're like a residentially focused mechanical firm. And they have some really great deliverables and do very extensive modeling. And so if your client is really into their mechanicals and they want to integrate a lot of systems and have complexities like a pool, things like that, I think it can be really great to hire just a firm to help you manage that. And then the multifamily, I'm learning because I'm doing a lot of multifamily right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to use the Minotaur, and I'm trying to figure out if the Efoca is better, and I'm trying to figure out, should I just do mini splits because I know that system? And there is no right or wrong answer. There's just a lot of opinions. So I don't know if that answers your question, Milton. Ask me in a year and I'll tell you what I think about multifamily.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Milton. Next up, we have a question from Lean. I believe that they might be gone. Nope, still here.
No, I'm here.
Okay, we'd love for you to ask your question.
All right, thank you, Tessa, for the presentation. Just curious on how does the energy modeling process plug into through the design phases? And the other part of the question was, how do you communicate those results with your clients, and how do you give them like significance in what you're trying to design?
So we generally do the WFI model. On my work, I generally have our staff do the WFI model at that transition from DD to CD where we've gone to engineering. But by that point, I'm like pretty confident about whether the project's going to be certifiable or not. I'm pretty confident about how it's going to model kind of instinctually, I guess. And I'm usually right on. So that's kind of when I integrate it in my process. But like I said, everyone in our office has like different comfort with that. And so does it at different times, a little earlier, what have you, using some other tools. But I usually WFI right at that DD to CD transition, and then make some micro adjustments then, a little more insulation here, maybe a slightly better window, little kind of tweaks like that. And then in terms of our communication to the client, I really don't rub my client's nose in what we're doing unless they're really curious and they want to be involved. So I will oftentimes just report back, we modeled it. It looks really good. We're right on target. And if they have any questions, then I'm happy to pop open the WFI and look at it with them. For the most part, people are like, oh, that's great. And I'll be like, these are the windows we're leaning towards. This is kind of, we want to do cellulose, better sustainable impact than fiberglass, and kind of, discuss some of the things that we're going to do. But does that answer your question, Lean?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next up, we have Chris. Chris, are you available to come off mute?
Hello. I'm hoping I'm the Chris.
Yes.
I wanted to know how many of the houses are net positive due to either wind or PV solar production, and if on the larger projects you're looking at networked geothermal.
So, let's see. First question. I have not done a ton with wind personally. I've had some clients that I would say have like kind of small hobbyist systems. And I could not speak to their efficacy. I think I'm really intrigued. I just don't have any personal experience with it. We do a lot of photovoltaic systems, and we're able to net out or be positive in an annualized basis most of our work. And I would say even the clients that maybe don't buy them right away, oftentimes buy them within 5 years of being in the home. So it's really common on our work, and we try to design every project if it makes sense. You know, like that project that I said was really shady and in the woods, there's no place that we could really, you know, put them there. So like that project isn't optimized for solar, but it would be the rarity, not the norm with our work. And then the other thing you asked, what was the third thing you asked?
Second question was on the larger projects. Are you considering networked geothermal? There's a group called HEAT, HEET.org, that are doing pilot projects now.
I have not considered that for our multifamily work. I could not speak to that with confidence. You know, I'm open. I know we're doing like a little geothermal system on a project we're doing in Portland with Bird's Mouth, like a little ground source loop that's going to integrate with the Minotaur. I don't know about large scale projects. I did a lot of geothermal like back in the day, but the systems were very expensive and didn't necessarily result in the energy savings that I would have liked, or, you know, production, I guess I could say, that I would have liked. So I would have to get back on the wagon to understand what's going on, you know, in that world. And I couldn't speak to it with confidence.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Next up, we have Frank Crawford from Calgary.
Hello. I guess my question is just, I'm seeing lots of concealed gutters used on kind of the higher end homes, and just wondering if any comments on those. Are they not just kind of a long-term, when they overflow and get plugged, are they not just dumping tons of water into your wall assembly? Would it not just be safer to do exposed gutters? They're easy to maintain.
So I actually have not done any concealed gutters on any of our work. I've looked at doing them on a couple projects, but I've actually just opted to do like custom ones, or like, you know, do like a custom wedge shape, or detail them in a way that they're exposed but still like cool and architectural. So that's the strategy we've taken so far. We haven't done any concealed ones. And I think there's good ways to do it. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out the detailing, but I feel like every time I try, I start getting uncomfortable with where the water is and like my ability to access to maintenance, and I don't know, all kinds of things. It just, I get uncomfortable.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Sean Santamore.
Oops.
Are you there, Sean? I think he might be driving, so I will ask this question for him. Just asking how you design mechanical systems into your builds.
Yeah, kind of what I mentioned earlier. We have a designer we work with now, and it's kind of a collaborative process where I'm trying to give him the room to you know, put the things he needs to put in there. I'm trying to give him the space to do that. And then for like the more complex or higher end projects, we use positive energy. And then for our commercial, like the multifamily work, I have brought my residential passive house guy. I've made him a consultant to my licensed mechanical engineer that does not care about passive house, but is who I'm going to get to care about passive house in the course of this project. And so I've made my usual guy a consultant to them, and I hope to find some magic with that solution. We'll see.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks, Tessa. Great stuff. I was slow on the unmuting, so thank you.
I think I'm handing it over to Jose to close out this first hour.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys. And I just wanted to make a little bit of I basically messed up today's episode. It is the design of a single family home passive house, tips and tricks from an architect. So I would like to invite you all for next month's 101 session of the 10 steps to building a single family passive house with Josh Selinger on May 3rd. So I just wanted to make that clear from the beginning. With that, I guess we can close it here, or I think we can have a couple more minutes or a couple more questions, but I'll leave that up to the accelerator and Kim.
Thank you, Jose. Yeah, we have about 4 more questions left. We will go until about 1:15 or a quarter after the hour, depending on where you are. So if you have any other questions to slip in, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. Next up, it looks like we have Tammy Bowen. Are you available to ask your question?
Hi, yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My question was pretty simple. I was just noticing some of the designs. It looks like the roofing material continues down the side of the home. Is that what's being used as siding?
Every project is different. That was just an architectural affect choice on some of the work.
Okay, so it is.
Yeah, you can use, I mean, it's just a house, right? You can use any
Yeah.
siding that you would use on a typical home, you can use on a passive house.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And really quick, I just wanted to say, I just noticed that Robert Knapp is here, who was one of my professors in college. And I'm just really excited you're here. Hi.
Feel free to come on and say hello later if you're around. Next up, we have Mark Willie.
Tessa, another great one. All these images, I'm sure everyone's screenshotting. They were super. In the beginning, you said octagon, don't get me started. So when you're reviewing that, to get you started, what are the highlights of that as a passive house, and what are some things that we should steer clear of? Because don't get me started really begs for more. Thank you.
Octagons are interesting shapes to design. They make a lot of odd shaped rooms on the inside, which has been challenging. But I will say that the octagon has great form factor, right? Like it's got a lot of square footage and not a lot of surface area. So its assemblies are not crazy because it's a great shape. So there's lots of complexity around. It's a timber frame passive house, and it's got this crazy 8-pointed star timber frame in the middle of the building. So I would say structurally, it has been very difficult, but from a form factor perspective, it's been just awesome.
Thanks, Mark. Next up, we have a question from Meyer Knapp. Are you available?
Yes, that's me. I'm Rob Knapp. I'm the professor that Tessa referred to.
Oh, great.
I'll start by saying how delighted and proud I am to listen to you and where you've gone since we worked together a long time ago.
Thanks, Rob.
My question is about differences in working with commercial clients versus single home clients. Bottom lines matter differently. And can you just talk about the differences you find between those two kinds of clients?
Sure. And I'll just be honest about our success or lack thereof, Rob. Residentially, I think it's very easy to sell a passive house. Multifamily, again, I think passive house makes a ton of sense, especially for people that are going to maintain ownership of the homes. Like Habitat for Humanity is a perfect, semi-commercial multifamily client because they retain the ability to buy back homes that get sold to keep them permanently affordable. They carry second silent mortgages on those homes. So they're almost like a real estate holding, but they hold debt, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so because they have first right of refusal and they buy back these homes, they actually have to remodel the homes a lot of times to get them back on the market and get them sold to someone else. And some of that's, interior finishes, but some of that's like generally the performance and maintenance of the home. And passive house, you have a good passive house, it'll last hundreds of years and it just might need a new kitchen every 20 or 30, right? So I think it makes a ton of sense for the right client. I have not personally sold passive house as like a restaurant or like a freestanding building. In the ways that some other consultants have been very successful in, getting schools and things like that. We have a school we might get to partner with McGranahan on in Seattle. We're a part of their RFP. And so there's opportunity for us to do that, but I think it's harder because unless someone's going to own the building long term, and unless the operation is a financial burden, I think it's harder to make the case. And I would be happy for someone else, with more experience to speak as well. But that's kind of been my experience is we've stair-stepped our way into a degree of success, but I haven't made the jump to like a full-on like a medical clinic yet or something like that.
Great. Well, thanks very much. And pass my congratulations and delight on to Rusa as well, please.
I will. She'll be really excited you came.
Thank you. It's so cool to have you here. Looks like we just have one last question. Looks like this person has left. How do you balance embodied carbon with your material selections?
So I'm definitely more aware of it than I have been. Obviously we cared in the beginning, but we also had so many things to figure out. And now we've gotten operational energy on most of our work down really, really low. And so now, I'm starting to see that the embodied energy is a greater percentage of the problem now. But I will say that I see these weird articles where people are like, it used more materials, we shouldn't do it that way. And then when you really see the studies on that sort of thing, we're talking about 5 to 8% more, of embodied energy. So like, I just really haven't seen a case that makes me intrigued by like the embodied energy piece of it. So for us as a firm, we're just making the best decisions we can. We're choosing cellulose over fiberglass when we can. We're trying to not use concrete. Concrete's embodied energy is just crazy, crazy bad, right? So we're not trying to just use it willy-nilly. Steel, same thing. So like we're trying to make good choices as often as we can, and that's not codified. That's not like a standard, but I will say it's a focus.
Great, Tessa, thank you. It looks like we've reached the end of our questions. Just a reminder to everyone that we have 10 steps to building a single family passive house May 3rd next month. And that is with Josh Salinger of Bird's Mouth Design. Thank you, Tessa, so much for being here. Thank you, Jose, for hosting. And it's great to see everybody today. Hope you have a great one.